Hello, welcome to another IT Wildcard episode. So in this episode I'm going to be chatting a little bit how I create frameworks for learning for my own use. So if you're thinking about, engaging in some formal or informal learning, hopefully you might get some ideas about different approaches you can use. So I suppose this falls into the category for me personally at the moment as informal learning, in that I'm not learning for a particular qualification or module, but I'm going to just talk about considerations for that as I go along on my own experience of taking and also delivering formal qualifications over the years. So and also the one I'm going to sort of talk around, the format, the framework, is very much what I'm currently using for my Learn to Code, Code to Learn series. So it's all about, what I'm finding best for learning languages informally, just for the hell of it. I mean, obviously it's to increase my my paradigm knowledge, and expand my world. But I don't have to sit, say, an exam in whatever I'm currently doing at the moment. So that would be I can't even remember what language I'm in. It's funny, I've just started, haven't I, with one of them, and it would be Prologue. Got there in the end. So Prologue. So yeah, I want to just give you some idea of what went through my head when I was trying to decide what to do in terms of the framework. So the first thing you have to do when you embark in any form of learning, I find, this is all personal opinion here. So, you can just ignore it, absorb some of it, absorb all of it. Yeah, whatever you feel like doing. Do what you want to do. Be who you want to be. So yeah, what I usually do is work, okay, what's going to be my learning framework per week in terms of the amount of hours I want to spend per week and how many weeks. Now, if you're on a formal course, so let's use when I was doing my postgrad way back as a thing. So I did that through the Open University, which is why I've got this up here. And you'll normally be given a rough benchmark about how many hours you should spend a week, depending on how you're doing the course. Now, for my Open University study, I was working full time. So around that point, I was doing a 9-to-5 job, so 35 hours a week. I've done studies where I've been working like a 40-hour week job. But in that instance, I was actually one day a week of that 40 hours was actually at college. Was one day and also an evening on top. So that was slightly different. Whereas with the Open University, I was working, 37 hours a week, or 35. And then I was having to find time outside of that to do all my studies. Now, of course, you can be clever. So what I did was that to get to these around 16 hours, I wasn't quite doing 60 credits just because of the way the postgrad program works. I mean, I could have done it. It's a bit more flexible in terms of you decide how many modules you want to do at once. It's quite possible that I did get, I'm just trying to think what's the most I did. I might have got up to 30 credits. But I remember the target for that was around like 12 plus hours. I mean, it was, around 12 hours a week, I think. But what I was doing was I was spending roughly an hour a day, lunchtime, learning, and then one whole day, so that might be a Saturday, studying, and then, or a weekday if I was working on a Saturday. And then on Sunday afternoons, I would do my assignments. I'd set aside for time for assignments. And then what I might do is if the lunchtime study hadn't gone very well, or I needed more time, I'd allocate some time in the evening to do that. So I was pretty committed at that point, and it was about a 2.5 year program of study, 2.5, 3 years program of study. Obviously, other ones I've done since then with the Open University different. I've done some 12-week courses. So the postgrad was 5 months of study for each module, just around that figure, I think. Yeah, so we're taking exams twice a year. But the overlap was pretty tight, actually. So it wasn't quite 6 months, but it was getting close, between 5 to 6. I did some other stuff, which was sort of undergraduate study, and that was around 12-week courses. But we were advised not to do more than one at a time. And that actually ended up taking me 3 years to do. But we were advised to spread it out a bit because it's pretty intense study. And that was all in web applications development. And I followed their advice. Some people didn't and were complaining that it was too much work. Well, that's why they said, only do a single module. My point is with this, where I'm getting to this, is I have experience of trying to squeeze, stuff into a working day. Now, currently, I'm not in that position. So obviously my time allocation is going to be different, and that's something you need to consider, is how much time per week are you actually going to be able to spend to do this alongside working. So currently the way I'm doing this is I spend 4 weeks learning a language, and during that time I allocate 3 days, and that's usually, because of filming commitments and other things, that's usually Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And I make sure that I try, and again with this I can be a bit loosey-goosey because I'm not trying to attain a qualification, but I want to try and get some core hours established. And for me, I borrowed from some sort of boot camp type thing, or the coding equivalent of a writer's retreat, of doing like 11 to 5. But what I tend to do often is I start a bit earlier some days. So I might start at 9 or 8:30 and then work through accordingly till say 3 in the afternoon. But I might do less. I tend to find the first week is when I do the most amount, and then it tails off a little bit, very slightly. So yeah, that's the first thing. Like, decide how many hours per week you're going to spend over whatever period of time. So for me, it's 4 weeks, and what I'm trying to do is 6 hours over 3 days. So that's 18 hours a week, which is the top end here. So that's quite a lot. And again, I can split that up in different ways, but it's obviously I'm in a position to be able to do that. You might have to decide, how much less, how much more, whatever. So that's the first thing. So that's step 0, is just how many hours per week. And if you're doing a succession like I am, so 4 weeks on one language, 4 weeks on another, then once I've decided that, is pretty much set in stone. I mean, I might tweak it, but I don't have to repeat that step and go back through each time and go, okay, how many hours this time. Along with step 0 is set up your program environment. Now that you will have to maybe change every 4 weeks or whatever time period you're allocating. But generally there's going to be core things there that are going to be the same. So, I'm not unlikely not to keep changing Visual Studio Code as my, my IDE, if you like. But I'm going to bring in different modules to help me out there, and obviously I'm going to have to bring in compilers and interpreters and whatever as well. So that's part of step 0, is just getting your working environment and deciding how many hours per week and how many weeks you're going to do this. So get that out of the way. That's done. So I usually do that. That's extra time, and I normally do that the weekend I'm going to start on my 4-week program and do that. So first week, so this is the 4-week summary. What I usually do, so let's say I was going to learn 4th, not that I'm going to learn this yet, sometime down the future, probably about a year or so from now, maybe 2. This is a really long-term thing. I've really got sucked into this in a big way. So let's use learning 4th as an example. Okay, so the first thing I'll do is go to the Wikipedia article and get a feeling for, the language. Now, I would have already looked here to set up my programming environment, because I normally go here first to work out where all the compilers are and stuff like that. So I've already looked through here a little bit, but on that sort of first week, if I don't have a particular book I'm going to use, so at the moment, my first week, if I'm going to be using something that's in the 7x7 book, so I'd be reading that in the first week, because that lines up nicely with 3 days. But if I'm learning a completely new language that isn't in that book, then I've got to just basically get some idea of where to learn the core concepts. So this is where I start. So I'm usually looking for some sort of introductory guide. The other thing I wanted to mention is, if you don't want to be bothered setting up a programming environment, you can always use some sort of online REPL, like Replit. Replit have Forth. So yeah. So just add that in as well. Now, what I usually will do is I'll find some sort of introductory guide that I know I can mostly absorb within the first, with over 3 days. So I might come in here into this one, G4th, and just work my way through the 4th tutorial, having first scanned through to make sure it's going to be achievable over 3 days. So you just find some introductory guide that you're going to be able to cover in your first week. That's what I usually do. Now, the other thing to remember is, as part of setting up the IDE, it does help greatly in this sort of first week of learning. Particularly, I find that you've got some sort of code highlighter in place. So you might decide to do that as part of the 0 week, if you like, the sort of setup. And generally my procedure for all of this, every language, is to download the particular programming language, set up Visual Studio Code, and as part of that, the syntax highlighting software, and then just test everything's working, and then I'm good to go. So yeah, so you're going to need all that for the first week when you're going through various code examples. Mixed in with that, if it's a language where I've not got a specific book, because sometimes I might choose a book which is nicely ties up to 3 days of learning, like the 7x7 does, then I'll dig into the actual Wikipedia article a bit more and just get some ideas about what I want to focus on in terms of what are the core concepts in the language. And a lot of Wikipedia articles are really good at doing that, like distilling down what should I be working on. So I want to build it around that. So yeah, so just first week, work through some sort of introductory guide. That might be part of a book. That might be online resources. I'll include all the links here relevant to Forth if anybody's interested in learning Forth. So then week 2, what I then proceed to do is review the core concepts using some sort of secondary source. So in this example, I might use this, which is normally the secondary resource, much bigger book. And what I will do is I'll use that book in combination with what I've learned on week 1 to produce training materials around what I consider to be the core concepts. So I'm really using this second book, this second resource. It doesn't have to be a book, just a second resource, but it needs to be a bit wider in some ways. It might be 2 resources maybe, just as many as you need. And what you're trying to do is sort of, fact check, if you like, your introductory material, or just make sure you're going down the right track for this. So anything that's going to help you do that. And the idea is then, as you go along, based around what you've deemed to be the core concepts, you produce some sort of training materials, either to act as your own aid memoir or to train others. So I usually do that in PowerPoint. So I'll be sitting in PowerPoint, I'll be sitting in Visual Studio Code, I'll be putting together code which I consider to summarize a certain concept, and then I will copy paste that, retaining the color coding into PowerPoint with the appropriate background, whatever I'm using, alongside any explanatory comments that I might need as well. So week 2, reviewing the core concepts, but expanding them out using secondary resources, and then producing some sort of content, either for personal consumption or wider consumption in whatever training or learning environment you want to use. Then week 3, work on creating modules, functions, methods in that language. So I then start to think, okay, if I was using this in anger, what sort of functions, modules would I find really useful for this language? Particularly interested in playing around with the language strengths. So what it is about the language that makes you want to use it, and then creating functions, methods, modules, or whatever else is the core modular approach to the language that might be useful. I find also helpful in that is looking at coding challenges, and also using Copilot. So at this point, when I move on to this 3rd week, I'm thinking about, the modular aspect of the programming languages, the digging through coding problems. I particularly use this one a lot, and then using Copilot to sort of kick the tires a bit more on this. So just some third wall to bounce off. At this point, you could use forums, that sort of thing. So you're trying to get a feel for what might be the strengths and weaknesses of the language by using your programming challenges, or just questioning, again, what you know already about the language. So that's week 3. And then week 4, I very much spend on reviewing what I've learnt, refactoring. We're looking through some idioms if they haven't already bubbled up, and then working with things like linters, or maybe if I got time, writing testing modules, or maybe ultimately working on some sort of small project. Normally I have a pet thing that I like to really kick the tires of the language. So there might be some sort of statistical thing I like to try out, or some sort of music-based thing where I'm interacting with an API, those sort of things. So a lot of us develop like go-to little projects which are quite used for like really testing out the language and seeing how it performs under stress. But also we have to make sure we pick the right thing to do that again really highlights the language. So yeah, that's part of week 4 for me. But week 4 is very much a review week, looking at what have I learned, how can I improve what I've learned, what tools are out there that can help me improve what I've learned, and what projects will help me do that. And that's it really. So week 1, learn the core concepts, some sort of introductory guide. Week 2, review the core concepts against some sort of 2nd or 3rd resource, and use that to produce training materials. Week 3, work on creating modules, functions, methods, something that allows you to really look at the language strengths, maybe try some coding challenges, use Copilot in the mix to help you out there a little bit. And then week 4, just a review week, reviewing what you've learned, improving on what you've learned, and learning methods to do that, either with linters or writing test modules yourself. Okay, so that's that. But then also, to add to this, I add in what I call background noise. So one of the useful things I've found to do is to try and replace your usual background noise, whatever that might be. So doom scrolling, or something that you think maybe a habit you want to get out of doing when you're sort of, you haven't got anything to do, or you're sitting around. And so for my background noise, what I tend to do is listen to podcasts about the language I'm learning, go on to exorcism. So go on to exorcism, watch, through some videos, free videos on various MOOCs that are out there, these massive online open courses like Coursera or edX or FutureLearn or Open to Learn, those sort of things, anything like that. And then also, library resources. I mean, there's a certain e-library resources like you can find on, in my case, Halifax Library Services, they have LinkedIn Learning. So there's stuff like that as well, which is really useful. And that just forms background noise. You just go in and instead of maybe, watching something on YouTube, unless it's, maybe, some random video, I might watch some random video on LinkedIn Learning or on YouTube, but connected to the programming language that I'm learning that week. And so that forms a background noise there. And that gives you a rough idea actually as well, whether you're sort of keen to carry on learning the language. So that's my background noise. So there we have it. That's my framework that I use currently to, learn this idea of learning a language every 4 weeks, learning a programming language every 4 weeks. Hopefully that was helpful. I'll include a link to the notes I'm using off to the side here in the description, and also links to all the websites I've spoken about and the articles. Thanks once again for watching. Bye for now, and I'll catch you in a future video.